Hello everyone, this is Vinyl Tap again. It be me. How you doing? This is, you're probably aware by now, you've probably watched a bunch of these episodes, I hope. If not, hello. Vinyl Tap is our vinyl, physical merch, physical items, a celebration of everything that is tangible and tactile that we engage with in metal and heavy music culture. I'm back with another one of these. Last time we went fucking long. I do apologise for that. I had a little bit of a conversation with people in the Discord about what kind of preferred length you like with these. Last time I went out with a theme in mind, which was sort of like one-off records, and I picked a whole bunch of things that went with that theme. Turned out there was a lot for that. This one, I know I say this every time, I am going to attempt to shorten this from the last one, and then the one following that, I will probably pick lesser again. So we're going to try and, over a series of videos, maybe chop this down. Today, I've not got a theme. I've just got, this is the sort of like recent pickups and stuff like that. We're going to go through them. I've also got, one of that's probably the most well-received episode we had of this particular series was the one where we spoke about non-records and books and stuff like that. So before I get to the pile of records that you can see next to me, I've got a couple of other things that I've recently acquired to depict in this particular thing. First of which, I won't spend too much time on, but I framed this. This is the set list that I caught from the Autopsy show at UK Deathfest right at the beginning of September. This is notable for me. A bunch of you probably have these, but never in my decade plus of going to rock and metal shows ever caught a set list. Just never had the luck or capacity to do so, and I'm not one of the people who sort of hangs around at the front going, please, please. But this, I wasn't even near the front. The bassist, literally, he made it into a very, very, very efficient, very streamlined paper airplane. That's what you probably can't see in the frame, but there are like fold marks and stuff on this that was that, and went right in between the legs of the two guys in front of me and landed directly there. So that was very, very cool. A nice memento because it was the first time I ever got to see Autopsy. They play in the UK sort of rarely. This was their first London show in like over a decade, I think, something like that. And yeah, very, very rad to, what was a great fucking weekend, get this particular thing. You can see on the sort of silver ink, I'm trying to not knock my microphone there, silver sort of shiny ink of their signatures and stuff like that splattered all over it. I don't believe this set list is entirely correct. I'm pretty sure that Ridden with Disease got sort of bumped down to this slot where Critical Madness was right before the end, which I don't think they played, but really fucking cool set list. I mean, ending on "fuck you," great little like 1 minute punk cover, great way to go. Also, I think missing from here is the song "Maggot in the Mirror," which they played, which was the one song they played off of their now newly released album, which is very, very good. Autopsy as always. That was a really fun tune. But yeah, absolutely a killer night. Me and my death metal mate I go to all these shows with, we both waited to see Autopsy forever, and this was a fucking lovely way to send that night off. So yeah, now along with all sort of art prints and stuff around the place, I do have, for the first time ever in my life, a framed set list of a great show that was attended. So that is very, very nice indeed. I mentioned the other episode where we were talking about mainly the non-metal thing, non-record things even, was mainly books and literature and so on. The last one of those that I did, the things I'd built up were basically all extreme metal related. There was the USBM book, Choosing Death, all the kind of stuff like that. This is my most recent acquiry in the sort of rock book world, and it is very different in that because it is Sellout. No less interesting than those. The major label feeding frenzy that swept punk, emo, and hardcore 1994 to 2007, written by Dan Ozzi, who I believe was a journalist who wrote for Noisy, I think, maybe Stereogum, all those kind of places in the kind of US punk and metal kind of sphere. This I bought basically as research for the Jimmy Eat World special that we completed not long ago. A lot of the sort of the major label story of Jimmy Eat World that we kind of hammer home a lot in, particularly the first part of that. Dan Ozzi's summary of it in here was very, very good and very useful in terms of putting that together. This, if you've not read it and you're into probably more into this than maybe the other books I was talking about in that other episode, thoroughly recommend it. It is a fascinating read. It is, as it says on the tin, about the thing that doesn't happen anymore, which is major labels swarming in over punk bands in particular that occurred sort of post Nirvana. It has an intro chapter which sort of sets up what Nirvana did, and then over sort of 12 or 13 chapters it spends time with a particular band and a particular album which was their major label debut, and tells the story of how they engaged and interacted with the major label system and what it did for them. So on the back here we've got the list of records that it talks about: Green Day, Jawbreaker, Jimmy Eat World, Blink-182, At the Drive-In, The Donners, Thursday, The Distillers, My Chemical Romance, Rise Against, and Against Me. And all of those stories have something about them that is fascinating. Even, you know, some of these bands I wasn't really familiar with. Very, very interesting to get to grips with them. All of them have a particular, I guess, quirk in how the sort of major label system came to them and then what they got out of it. I was going through and reading every chapter with the record in question, like listening on, and some of these, again, I wasn't really particularly that familiar with Jawbreaker. That record's really fucking good. The Donners turns out really, really fun, basically like girl punk AC/DC or something, like very, very playful and enjoyable, and, you know, a good opportunity to just go back and revisit Coral Fang or Dude Ranch or Siren Song of the Counterculture, whatever it may be. Very, very thorough. I would say it's pretty much an essential read if you are interested in the particular subject matter that's going on here. My only notes would be, there's a little chapter at the start where he talks about sort of the stories and the bands that didn't quite get their own chapter, because there are so many of these particular stories. The one that he mentions there that I wish he had done, just personally I think it would be interesting, is AFI Sing the Sorrow. Does not get a chapter here, which I think, considering how massive they were in the 2000s, you know, what they went on to have with Miss Murder and stuff like that, I think it would have been worth a chapter. They do pop up from time to time in regards to the Thursday chapter and stuff like that, bands they sort of interweave with. The other one is, I guess, more of a geography thing, because the final chapter is on New Wave by Against Me, which also, as it turns out, when I was going through and listening to all of these records, the only record that I didn't actually enjoy was New Waves. Sorry. But it talks about Against Me's major label story, which is interesting, but it sort of uses that as like the bookend of like, this is the last time that this happened. There's the sort of the era that begins here with Nirvana and Dookie in particular, comes to a close with New Wave and Against Me's kind of major label situation, which I think is probably fair, particularly from a US perspective. However, here in the UK, we know there is another story of a band that had a insane dalliance with a major label that happens after New Wave that does not get covered in this, and that is Gallows with Great Britain. And I feel like it's a very, very US-centric book in order to overlook the Great Britain story, which is one of the most fucking mental of all of these to come that. So my only notes would be, add a Sick the Sorrow and a Great Britain chapter. But other than that, if you want to know about these records and the stories of them, very, very fascinating. I mean, even, you know, bands like Blink-182 and Dude Ranch and stuff like that, with stories have been covered. There's a lot of there's anecdotes and stuff in here that is super, super entertaining. So yeah, Dan Ozzi's Sellout. Again, if you are interested in the kind of stuff that we were covering in the first part of our Jimmy Eat World special, there's a lot more information on that and other bands in similar situations in this. So yeah, Sellout. Onto the records. I believe the last video I did, when I said I had a theme in mind, it stopped me doing things like look at all my Anaal Nathrakh records, because I was picking out individual things. I don't remember if that was an intentional reference or not, but we're going to start with a bunch of Anaal Nathrakh records because it is a recent thing I have picked up. This actually comes from in the TNM Discord for patrons a couple of months ago. Someone just randomly dropped that HMV were having a vinyl sale, and it seemed like quite a limited vinyl sale. I don't know if it was like a stock thing or something, but it was just like a handful of titles that they'd gone, half price or whatever it was. And in the metal realm, I believe someone else said they were picking up, because again, it was what was there really. A bunch of Nathrakh records were on sale there, and so in order to fill out the gaps in the collection, I picked up these three from there, in the Constellation of the Black Widow, Passion, and a record I've spoken about on the show briefly before, Vanitas. These are, I guess, the candlelight years of Anaal Nathrakh. I don't remember who they're signed to right now. I think it might be Metal Blade. But these three records in the sort of late 2000s going into the early 2010s, put out through Candlelight, and these three records in particular being that label deal, they did get vinyl reissues a couple of years ago that looked very, very fancy. I was always looking at them being like, oh, I should pick those up at some point. And it turns out the opportunity arose here perfectly. This, I guess, is important to me because this is the era in which I got into Anaal Nathrakh. The first song I heard of Nathrakh's was from Passion. It was the Volunteer Non-Fit Inuria track. It was on a Metal Hammer comp, and that was kind of made me go like, oh shit, this band is fucking intense, aren't they? And then just a year later, they put out Vanitas, and that was the record that turned me into like, okay, you are one of my favourite bands. I need to listen to and buy everything you've done because you're scratching an itch for me that no band to this day ever has. So a particular a formative era for me and my Nathrakh fandom. I suppose interesting for the band in general. In the Constellation of the Black Widow in 2009, almost like a sort of transitionary from sort of the extremely necro band they were in the 2000s into maybe towards something that we know them to be now. But it is in its own right sort of one of their masterpieces. If you did a poll of like what's the best Nathrakh record, a lot of like long-time fans would probably say Constellation. They're all on some kind of cool coloration. This is a sort of like mottled grey, which is probably the least crazy of them, but fucking in like wildly intense record. It's like 29 minutes and every single track on it is unbelievable. Like this is one of their 10s, very much like if you've got into Nathrakh sort of for recent stuff and you want to go back forwards, this is definitely ones that would be recommended to you. Passion is probably the real transitionary point in terms of it's maybe the most sort of underrated Nathrakh record. It's not quite a fully formed in what it is going for thing like Constellation was, or something like Endarkenment we be recently. It's maybe their most experimental record. There's a lot of like strange industrial and noise stuff, and some tracks are quite short, almost like weird little like snippets, while others like Drug Fucking Abomination is one of their best songs. It's like 7 minutes or something, but it's a really fucking scary record in what a lot of that does. This is on this sort of like pinky and white purpley, but yeah, if you're into sort of the weirder side of Nathrakh and you want to hear them sort of trying some strange things, Passion is a real one to go for. I've always been struck by the cover artwork of this, which is almost like, reminds me of like Silent Hill creatures or something like that. It's like weird anatomy. I don't know what's going on there, but it's kind of striking and unsettling. The song as well, Todd Huet Uebel, the first song on the B-side here, has a guest vocal from Rainer Lanferman, who used to be in the band Bethlehem, which is relevant to something I'll probably have coming up in a different one of these videos, but that is one of the single most terrifying guest vocal spots of all time, maybe the one. Definitely worth hearing for that alone. I mean, you've got Nathrakh and you get a guy turning up who sounds more terrifying than Dave does on vocals. So Passion, strange, scary album, and that led into, like I said, just a year later, Vanitas, which I think represented a bit of an apotheosis for what Nathrakh were doing at the time. This is where those real kind of hulking, grooving kind of metal riffs that leads them through to something like Forward on A New Kind of Horror more recently really took hold, but it still has the scathing intensity of, like, again, looking at the Candlelight era stuff. Like I said, when this came out, I was fucking obsessed with it. This was an album that I believe I put in my top 20 albums of the decade, and we did that at the end of 2019. I would still stand by that. The only interesting thing is that within a year of me doing that, they released Endarkenment, which kind of did some of the things that this does, like particularly the clean chorus aspect, to an even further degree. So Forging Towards the Sunset in particular is the song that, if you've ever seen Nathrakh live, you will probably have seen them do that one because it is such a standard and a staple. Fucking incredible. But again, that took them even further into songs like Endarkenment in more recent years. So they're always kind of evolving and doing something, even if there is this really bass sound that goes through their whole career. But this is still a fucking monstrous record. A Fire and Fucking Pigs, that you can see the title from there. Classic Nathrakh stuff, but that is another really incredible like Nathrakh banger. Like if you're looking for the sort of like just monster tunes that maybe Passion is sort of a little bit lighter on, this is the record of their slightly older stuff now. I mean, 10 years old now, fuck me. But that's like, this is rammed with those. And again, another really striking, intriguing cover art. This, I think, is one of the wilder looking fucking record splatters that I have. Like, I don't know why they went so all out with it, but it's on like this fucking almost like army camo, like green, black and white situation. Looks fucking... the lighting here is not the best because it's getting dark at this time of year to really see it, but it is a fucking wild one. I was going to do one of these videos last weekend, but I came back from Damnation. I had the Damnation flu that you might be able to still hear in my voice, but we're now doing this a week later, and it is a little bit darker again. Hey-ho. I went to see Perturbator last night, though, and that was fucking incredible. Next up is the most recent thing I've purchased. It's the new Behemoth record. Again, fucking lighting. You can't even see the gold embossed logo on it. My camera quality isn't the greatest, I'm sorry. But this is the new Behemoth record. It's called Opus Contra Natvram. Maybe you would have been able to see it better if I'd bought the black cover variant, which does look very, very cool. The black cover variant, I believe, was the picture disc, and I didn't want the picture disc, so I went with the normal white one that you will have on all of your streaming services and stuff. It is a very, this, like, the cross and everything is, like, embossed, so there's the texture from it feels, like, really, really stand out and cool. I love Behemoth. I don't know if you knew from 4 or 5 years of me doing this show. One of my favourite bands, always going to buy what they do. This new record, you probably heard our review of it. I think it's really, really, really good. Has some sort of hang-ups with it that the previous couple of records that, you know, represent Behemoth sort of at their apotheosis, really, don't quite have, but it is a fascinating and for me, like, banger heavy reward follow-up even to continuation of what that kind of era of Behemoth is doing. I said one of the problems I have with it is like the mixing and the mastering and stuff, and I was wondering how it would sound on vinyl. I've spun this the once. It did sound quite a bit better, I must say. I don't know how much of that is my sort of like, you know, some kind of placebo effect of like, oh yeah, that is a bit better. But it just sounded fuller. It didn't sound quite so sort of compressed into a thin sort of line. I think some of the guitar sounds I was saying that are still quite low, I guess, in comparison to what you normally expect from Behemoth, but this does sound quite full in this particular form. I love Behemoth's packaging, always. Like, their art style and their photography and everything, as you know from the 8 years now since The Satanist, is so grand in particular, and I mean, like, that's Behemoth, you know, like this fucking horseman of the apocalypse, there's only 3 of them, horseman of the apocalypse thing that they have is such a marker of theirs now, even going into the live streams and stuff that they did. So it does look very, very cool. This, I believe, is the lyrics booklet, which they always put so much, like, again, sort of thought and presentation into. Cool graphics and stuff for particular songs. Maybe not the most fancy thing they've ever done when, again, the Satanist exists, but, like, it does look particularly fucking lavish. This might not have been the picture disc. I believe it's on a, like, gold that, oh no, a white. What has, again, you can't see with the lighting, it's sort of a white with very, very light gold flickers. Pathetic. Can't fucking see a thing. But trust me, it's there. I think I remember on the sticker, this particular variant, I think it was like limited to 300 or something like that. But yeah, I mean, not necessarily my favourite album of the year, but still one that is one of the ones I would have listened to more, like, the most amount of times, because there's always so much joy for me in sort of unpicking what is going on with the Behemoth record. The tour recently, when I saw a lot of these songs live, that was cool. I'd even like to see a few more of them live, like Malaria Vulgata and Upon a Pale Horse and stuff like that. So great new Behemoth record to add to the bunch of them behind me. Cool stuff. Let's try and fly through this a little bit more. This was a recent pickup when I went to Dark Earth Records in the Wirral near Liverpool, where I live. I think this was from the first time I went, and I haven't shown it in a video to my knowledge. If I have, then apologies for the repetition. But yet, it's Imperial, Triumphant, and their not most recent album now, but the one before that, Alphaville, one of the most sort of acclaimed extreme records of the T&M era, I suppose. Opens up like this, which is not the way the cover is, because the cover folds out like this to get the full artwork, which is fucking awesome. I remember for a while they were selling like a poster or an art print I think there might be a poster in here actually, but like a really high glossy kind of quality art print of this whole thing. Like, it's an incredible piece of work visually, which very much matches what the interior of the record. Apologies. There's that damnation flu. Fuck. But yeah, what the record sounds like. I believe it's I can never say his name. Zbigniew Bielsak or something like that. Who's done some really really great metal artworks in recent years, and this is one of his most detailed and most standout ones. But Alphaville. I mean, between this and the new one this year, which is not quite as good as this, but is even more fucking bug nuts insane, which means I almost love it like as much. Like, you've probably heard and decided whether Imperial Triumphant are for you or not. A lot of people are very much overwhelmed by what's going on and find it to be a kind of exhausting, slightly joyless activity. I will say that it took me, like, again, a little while after becoming aware of them to get into them, and Alphaville was the album where it properly clicked and went, oh my god, you're one of the best bands around. So maybe give it time. But if you are an Imperial Triumphant fan, you will know how unique and rewarding the experiences are. This is just on plain black, which is a nice change because it means you can actually get the impression of what the colour is from this particular shitty lighting and camera setup. But very like a very glossy looking album. Has a real I love the kind of hedonistic, lavish, again sort of high society feel that Imperial's records have, and if the packaging and so on matches it, that's nice there. Again, this is the normal poster edition of that fold out artwork, not to be confused with how, like, again, I think it was quite large as well, like maybe the size of one of these posters behind me, version of it that they were selling. No lyrics booklet or anything that I can see, just the guys themselves looking very again ominous there. But this was, again, a must vinyl purchase for me because it's such a world of an album and such a immerse yourself in it and try and experience the sort of sounds as tactilely as you can, because it is so vivid. Still one of the best extreme records of, I guess, the 20s so far. If you never got on board with that at the time, there's still, still worth in time in going back and discovering it, because it is a really, really unique, forward-thinking, one of the most rewarding heavy records, I guess, full stop, of recent years. So Alphaville, a great necessary pick up and purchase for me there. Next up are, speaking of some of my favourite record stores, talking about Dark Earth there, my next two are things I picked up when I went to Crypto the Wizard in London, which is run by my friend Charlie Wizard, as he goes by sometimes. Again, I think I've mentioned it before, but it is like the best sort of cult heavy metal record store in London. Don't go there if you're expecting just to buy, the sort of the new Nuclear Blast records or something like that. But if you're looking for things that are a little bit more sort of underground, Crypto the Wizard is like a must go to. I went there for the first time since the COVID pandemic, actually. We're at the weekend that I was in London for UK Deathfest and got that Autopsy setlist. In that time, he'd moved the site. I think it's like just a few doors down from where it was used to be, and it's in an even smaller, like, it's proper like entering a little, like, cult metal cubby hole. But very pleased to go there again recently, and I picked up these two records by the same band. It's the Devil's Blood, who are a band who I think are long overdue for some TNM coverage, because I mention them quite a lot, but we've never actually done them on anything. But this is their second record. The band no longer exists. They released 3 records, the third of which is almost like a sort of unfinished work as was kind of album, because the guitarist and I think primary songwriter Selim took his own life not long before that came out. But this is their second of their 2 fully formed records, the Thousandfold Epicentre. As you can see from this little sleeve, even with the reflection and so on, the art is fucking wild. This is not the art that you will have for the record on your streaming services and so on. There's almost like a little, the more normally kind of seen cover is like a little sigil. But this is a reissue that Van Records, which always kind of carries quite bizarre cult kind of avant-garde kind of stuff in the heavy music sphere. Put out this, I guess, a year or two ago. It was fairly new in Crypt of the Wizard, and the art on it is like wild. And I think if this art doesn't convey whether you'll be interested in hearing this record or not, there's not much point in going on beyond that, because Devil's Blood were the primo band in terms of kind of occult psychedelic rock that had that big revival kind of at the turn of the 2010s. We spoke about it recently with Uncle Acid and the Deadbeats, or they're more in the kind of like Black Sabbathy doom variety, which is not where the Devil's Blood really sit, but like where so many of those bands were sort of like pastiche or a bit lame. The Devil's Blood were the one where you could so clearly tell that this was like a generational kind of talent who were fully embodying everything that music was meant to be, and that's why people are still in that world so utterly enamored by what they were doing nearly a decade past them being around and being an active band. The Thousandfold Epicentre is not my favourite of their records. The first one would be my absolute favourite, and there's an edition of that record that if anyone has and wants to sell it to me, they did like a deluxe version that came in like a cloth bound sort of box that, again, very satanic looking and very ritualistic and so on, but that looks absolutely wonderful. But this is another sensational record. It's quite long. It's like a good 70-minute sort of odyssey of very immersive, like you can kind of almost like breathe in the kind of the scents and the incense and so on in this very, very quite timeless progressive rock journey, I guess. This is on a very sort of very lovely kind of reddish, sort of blood red, maroonish, very deep coloration. I believe both records are the same colour in that regard. I'll do a quick little check because it is a fucking heavy double LP. It was, double LP priced. It wasn't a cheap buy, but it was one that I had to have in the collection because I fucking adore this band and what they did. The other major thing to have in here is, like the crazy cover art, there is a thick, heavy booklet with all the lyrics and so on that goes even more full on into the kind of psychedelic cover. I mean, the lyrics are sort of almost indecipherable. It reminds me of Watain, who was a band they were sort of like associated with. Farada from this band, the singer, is the vocalist who does the clean singing part on the song We Remain on the new Watain records. But like some of their lyric books and stuff, it's almost like fucking with a magnifying glass trying to figure out what the fuck is being written, but it all adds into, again, this sort of like almost like semi-lucid, half-dreamed interpretation of the album and so on. But like, in terms of, again, very almost like satanic inversions of like classical artwork and so on, but imbued with all of this like crazy warped psychedelic spin on things. It's a really, really beautiful record to have. Another one that I want to spin a few more times, certainly within the near future, when I get the right moments, because it is such a it's another world, of an album to live in, as much as it is very different in sound to Imperial Triumphant. I said 2 records I got from Crypt of the Wizard from them. The other one is the 10-inch of their demo. The demo, I guess 2007 is what that would be in Roman numerals. Again, I need to pick up the first album, which logically fits in between these two things. But I don't own many 10 inches, but this is a cool one to have. Really fucking rad artwork. It feels demo-ish in terms of not being as insane as like that, but it's also cool enough in illustration for it to be like, if it was an album cover, you'd go, nice. This features the Graveyard Shuffle, which I believe is the one song, actually 2 songs actually, on here, but the songs that don't make it to album, so I will still stick on this to listen to the Graveyard Shuffle and stuff like that, which again, as sort of outright spooky as they ever got, really. There's also the song It's On here, and then there are 2 songs from it that do make their way onto the album, which is Christ or Cocaine and the Anti-Cosmic Magic, and those 2 songs being part of that like fucking out of this world incredible record are both utterly phenomenal. So nice getting here in a demo form, just a normal black 10-inch, quite sort of lo-fi feel to the packaging. This also just has a little Crypt of the Wizard sticker in it that I got naturally from purchasing it there. But if you don't know the Devil's Blood, definitely won't be the last time they'll be mentioned on TNM. But if you're interested in, I mean, it's so melodic, it's so soulful, and it is quite accessible in that regard. But there is a world unto itself in regards to what's going on in the music and the power it holds. So essential listening in terms of 21st century rock music, as far as I'm concerned. Moving on from the more occult stuff, are things that maybe the rest of you will be engaged with. The Menzingers, got 2 records here. One of these purchased more recently than the other one. Me and my girlfriend recently, we went to the Menzingers UK tour. I'm sure a bunch of you did as well. While we were there, my girlfriend bought, after the party from the merch table, Hello Exile. She bought not long after it came out, I guess, but I suppose with After Party here was the opportune time to show it off. I don't own a lot of, I guess, the worlds around the Menzingers, you know, emo, kind of alt-punk, whatever you want to call it, records, but these, particularly After Party, they feel like essentially classic rock records, right? Like, and I'm not saying I wouldn't be averse to, I would be averse to getting, you know, On the Impossible Past or whatever. I know they've just reissued that, and I was looking at it like, oh, that is a great record. But I mean, with After the Party, they turned so much into like a timeless, that could come out in any era American rock band. And I mean, those are records that I would certainly not be the ones that I like, you know, classic American rock records, not things I would shy away from getting on vinyl. So as, you know, a modern day equivalent that is as good, if not better, than almost all of them, After Party, I mean, you all know how much of a modern classic in terms of like where we're coming from and what we cover, this record has gone on to be. But revisiting it now, 5 years later, it still holds up in that regard. Amazed 5 years later, because this was the record where I essentially became aware and got into the Menzingers, because, you know, On the Impossible Party and all of that, not my scene at all. This was where I plugged into the Menzingers. So it amazed me how much fucking younger they look on this photo than what they are now. Like, this feels like a different era. Look at fucking Baby Greg's, like, slightly hanging over scene haircut, and, you know, like, these guys have got way less hair now than they do in this. I mean, Tom always looks about the same, but, like, they've come a long way in just 5 years since making this record. But looking at this track list on the back, like, I mean, as much as you can't see it in that, I mean, you probably know the track list, but, like, it is classic song after classic song. I mean, even, like, when we discussed that tour, they're even still fucking heavily weighting their set list on it, even though they've released music since then. It's that fucking good. It's on a nice baby pink, not baby blue, but baby pink colour there. Utterly incredible. You can call it a classic rock record, and it slides in with anything that's ever come from that genre. The other one is, of course, Hello Exile, which, like I said, has been sitting on my shelf for longer. The follow-up record to After the Party, another one that I really love, honestly. I think a lot of you as well. I think it got the sort of, it's the follow-up to After the Party, and it's not quite as, like, unbelievable as that, but, like, still, America, You're Freaking Me Out, Anna as a 1-2, and again, coming away from that show, there were songs on this record, considering that was the first time I'd seen them since they released this, that I was disappointed to not see them play. I mean, Strangers Forever is like the third single on it, I suppose, and that's another fucking classic Menzingers song. I always really loved London Drugs from this, is really, really fun. Farewell Youth as well is maybe excluding... is it Living Ain't Easy that finishes After the Party? But yeah, excluding the After the Party one, maybe my favourite Menzingers closing track. I think Farewell Youth is fucking gorgeous and quite an underrated song. But a really, almost like a transitional record, I suppose, in terms of where they're going, because I think a lot of people were slightly surprised by like how Greg heavy and how sort of away from the punk again it was. I suppose we have to wait and see what comes next from them to see how much of that is confirmed, but just plain black, this one, but it slots right in terms of, like, if you retrospectively, whenever the Menzingers hang up and we look at like a classic Menzingers run that would start on the Impossible Past, this goes in that, absolutely, as much as I've forgotten the title of it now, but the one in between the two, like, properly classic records that has I Want to Be an Asshole on it and In Remission and all that stuff. Like, I think that record, as much as I can't remember the title of it right now, is really great again, and like a 4-album run of awesome stuff that is coming out of this band right now. This will naturally sit in that. And then, finally, last records for this particular video come from the world, again, of heavy fucking metal. Not extreme metal this time, but proper classic heavy metal. Eternal Champion with The Armour of Ire and Ravening Iron. This is the best band in, I guess, cult heavy metal right now. You're probably, if you're not a fucking, a Decibel magazine nerd or whatever, you probably don't quite know what I'm getting at with that. But like, Eternal Champion is in the world of pure, almost revivalist heavy metal, particularly of the epic variety. Like, it feels like epic heavy metal in the tradition of, Manowar are the big band from that world that everyone will know by name, but particularly bands like Manila Road and Kirith Ungol and stuff like that had a big boost in how influential they were. I guess from around the time that The Armour of Ire, the first Eternal Champion record, came out. You hear it in doom metal with the likes of, Chemist particularly, and Spirit Adrift and so on. You hear it in hardcore a lot, partially because of, members of Eternal Champion have those crossovers into the hardcore scene. Like Arthur Rizek is in this band, their singer Jason Tarpey was in hardcore bands. And the way hardcore punk in the last few years has embraced kind of like powerful, weighty, sword-swinging, classic heavy metal vibes more than it ever has before, it is all part of this. And I think Eternal Champion and Visigoth are a slightly more mainstream variant because they're on just a larger record label and stuff like that. But in the underground, Eternal Champion are like the band who most embody that. And these records have become like texts for people who are into that particular sound in the modern day, because no one's done it like this to this level probably since the likes of kind of Kirith Ungol at their peak. And even then, that's not to say it's purely it's not like an Airborne situation where it is just the sound of one other band. There is, again, that kind of hardcore edge that has gone on, the power trip edge or whatever that the influence that people like Arthur Rizek and so on has had. It moves into some, so it does feel very 80s, but there's also, and again, it has that sort of like lo-fi classic kind of production job, but it doesn't feel out of step with what's going on in sort of heavy music today. Armour of Ire I've had for a long time. This record came out in 2015. Again, it almost is a bit of a seminal kind of point for the direction of where this music has gone since. Ravening Iron, released in 2020. It was during that period when the show wasn't running, and I remember doing my little write-up about this particular album and how sick it is. I've gone back to it and enjoyed it even more since actually it was first released. This I picked up the first time I got to see them finally. They toured in the UK earlier this year. I think it was like June. I think they were meant to play that weird festival Manifest that like is one of those mini festivals that's popped up sort of in the middle of nowhere and then understandably gets pretty immediately cancelled, and all the bands who were there were scrabbling around to find shows and stuff. Eternal Champion ended up booking like a whole UK tour when they are only meant to do this one show. So I wasn't going to see Eternal Champion, but through the matter of how things fell, me and lots of other people did, which is great. I mean, you can see from this artwork, again, I think it's one of the last metal artworks done by the great Ken Kelly, before he sadly passed away earlier this year, which we covered on the show. But you can see from the vibe here exactly the kind of epic, old school, fantasy, very male dominated, you can imagine, vibe that they're drawing on. It's full on classic fucking Conan, Frank Frazetta stuff going on here. But I love that vibe. I mean, this is the year I've gotten into fucking Conan the Barbarian, all this kind of stuff, and these are the ultimate soundtracks to that kind of thing. The Armour of Ire, I think, is still my favourite record of theirs. This is, again, almost like a modern classic of the epic heavy metal, US power metal, whatever you want to call it, world. It is a sensational album. The open and run of it, I Am the Hammer, which is a fucking, again, 10 out of 10 epic heavy metal song. It's the title track. I also particularly love the Cold Sword on side B, which I didn't do live, sadly, but it has one of my favourite like heavy metal riffs of the last 10 years or so. Really, really bright and punchy sounding. I mean, the way his albums sound, I think is fucking incredible. Like, it's so not flimsy. It's so not kind of a weak, underproduced version maybe of what this sound can be. It's full and punchy as hell. It just has a very vintage sound to it, which I guess leans into, again, the sort of like fantasy, sort of escapist, far-flung, fanciful sort of idea that it has. But cool like inlay and stuff like that, particularly because of this map and stuff like this. Eternal Champion singer Jason Tarpey, again, he's a large dude, like not fat, but like hench. He is sings in hardcore bands and stuff like that. He's fucking a powerful man, but he's also one of those great, the category of people where, you know, absolute fucking nerd, even though they look like not a weedy nerd, the classic US movie idea of like the nerd who gets bullied at school. He is like the nerd who would have the physical power to step on you. And I think he's like a blacksmith. He makes his own swords or whatever. On the UK tour, he was wearing like chainmail that I presume he put together himself. But he also writes again, like Robert E. Howard style fantasy novels and stuff like that. And a lot of those, the sort of world he's created feeds into the lyrics of Eternal Champion. Some of them are about Conan, some of them are about like Lovecraft and stuff like that, but also some of them are his own sort of created mythos, where I Am the Hammer, again, just the lyrics of that song and how catchy they are. I don't know, like I'm singing about this guy's created mythos as much as I would something that is maybe more publicly ingrained, like just because of how catchy and memorable it is, even though I don't know who the Riders of Tarsal or the Guards of Lorne are or whoever. But, you know, this map here relates to his, like, created world. So there's all that kind of stuff if you're into that kind of nerdery going on with them. Ravening Iron, I think it took like 5 years, actually, for them to put the follow-up record out, which probably felt like quite a long time. But whenever they do, it's so worth it. And Ravening Iron was the second, currently latest record. And again, it's another one that if you go straight into it without hearing anything else, you will understand exactly what the vibe is. And it's another, I mean, one of the things that I suppose maybe comes from that either hardcore or old school heavy metal mindset, again, is there's not a lot of fat on it. Both records are like 8 tracks, 4 tracks aside, something like that, and every track's a banger. And side A on this one in particular is a Face in the Glare, Ravening Iron, and Skullseeker are 3 fucking excuse me, unbelievably good heavy metal songs. Coward's Keep on side B, also top tier. Skullseeker, you know, creating this kind of character of the Skullseeker, who you just want to know more about. This record in particular, I think, has so many like cool lines on it in that sort of medievalist heavy metal fantasy with a face in the glare of my steel I see the face of a god. Like Ravening Iron is one that's always stuck in my head for thousands of swords, no one can take them from me. Do you know how fucking full on you got to be to have thousands of swords and for no one to be able to take one sword away from you? That's the strength that's going on within Eternal Champion. This kind of school of, like, you know, again, sword-swinging heavy metal lyricism. Weirdly, Taylor Swift, on, I think it's Folklore, one of the folk albums that she put out the other year, there's a line on it where she says something like, "Cold was the steel of my axe to grind," and it always strikes me so funny because it sounds like an Eternal Champion lyric. So weirdly, Taylor Swift can embody the particular vibe of what this is, but it's such a great thing to be going on in the current metal landscape, I suppose. Like, I really value stuff like Eternal Champion being quite not just as good as it is, the fact that there are bands doing this so well, but as sort of buzzy on an underground level it is as well, of people like really flocking to it and becoming enamored with it. Visigoth, again, the slightly more higher profile just in terms of budget version, desperate for them to release a new album. I fucking love that band, and this whole thing has been something that you know, I've always loved, and I loved the Armour of Ire when it came out in sort of the mid 2010s, but now more than ever I am like wanting stuff like this. And if you are too and you don't know Eternal Champion, either of these records is absolutely the way to go. So that is it. 45-minute mark. That is indeed a 15-minute or so shrinking from the last one. I will try and do similar again. Thank you very much for watching this and sticking along, and hopefully you'll have something that will have sparked your interest from that particular pile. I'll try and get someone else to get in and do one of these. If not, won't be too long before I do something. Christmas coming up, so we'll see what goes on there. If you've got any records or whatever that again, there's always the Christmas sort of pile in of like, ooh, what did you get? Chuck it in the Discord. You know where we are. And yeah, thank you very much for being with me.